Good afternoon. Welcome to The Big Show. The Big Show comes at you every single day. We're brought to you by FanDuel Casino and everything else. Of course, FanDuel, we will talk about that a little bit later. We'll look at Monday Night Football matchup through the eyes of FanDuel Casino. But before that, let's get right into what we're going to talk about today. We've got the Steelers with a big win yesterday over the Bengals. And I think one of the things about that game that was so much different than the first time around is that the Steelers on defense played what I would call maybe their best game given the offense they were going up against. Now, against the Colts, I thought they played really well against the Colts. But again, when you get 6 turnovers, it's hard to really kind of figure out just how good you are, because some of them are just the happenstance and the luck of the bounce and all that other kind of stuff. But what they did on Sunday to me was really impressive because they had the 2 pick sixes. Both of them really, if you think about it, were basically just really good plays from the standpoint of defense being where they needed to be and making a play. Actually, I think, now that I think about it, if I'm not mistaken, the one was a pick six. The other one basically took the ball down, to where they could score. Where it's easy to score, and so there was that. So at any rate, it was basically, to me, and the way I look at it, they played really well. They shut down the Bengals offense. They shut down Jamar Chase. They shut down T. Higgins. They shut down Joe Flacco. And, some of it was what they did up front, but it wasn't like, they were overly, getting to Flacco and sacking him. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, they only had 1 sack. And really, they only had 2 tackles for losses. They've had games this year where they've had 4 or 5 sacks and, 10, 11, 12. I think one game they had 15 tackles for losses. So it wasn't like they were, basically getting to Flacco and hitting him every time. But what they were doing, was basically making him throw the ball a little bit sooner than he wanted to. They knocked a few passes down at the line of scrimmage, and they got some pressure on him that they didn't get the last time. The other thing that they did was they did an extremely good job of accounting for Jamar Chase on pretty much every play. The first time they played, he was running wild and able to do whatever he wanted to do, really. Ran all over the field. I mean, the game-winning drive was, the photo you've seen on social media and everything else. It's just one of the things I would tell you. It's going to be interesting. I believe that this secondary they have, I think Cal Duggar has made a very big, a difference for what they're doing. And I'll tell you the other guy yesterday that played really, really good was James Pierre. And I didn't know whether or not they were going to be able to, I didn't know whether or not they were going to be able to cover the Bengals. But I think what they did is, instead of trying to go so much man, they actually played some tighter zones. They actually gave their receivers some help with Jamar Chase and even T. Higgins. I don't think that the Bengals had a lot of room to operate and a lot of room to throw the ball. I think it was one of those things where they basically just didn't do a great job, the Bengals, of adjusting to whatever it is the Steelers were doing. I think that's the most important thing, is the Steelers actually outcoached the Bengals staff. I actually thought the Bengals defensive staff did a reasonably good job against the Steelers, and we'll get to that. We'll get to the quarterback, and we'll get to all that stuff. But to me, I mean, you have to start out talking this game when you consider the Bengals scored what they scored, 42, I think, the week before, and the week before that they scored, I think, 37 or something. I mean, they score a lot of points. They're a really good offense. And the Steelers did a really good job of just sort of jamming them up and getting inside and getting inside leverage and really not allowing the Bengals to chop them up the way they did the first time. So the question then becomes, and I think that's the thing is it sustainable? I just don't know, because James Pierre played really, really well yesterday. But is it a one-off? I don't know. Is it a situation of where, he's going to be somebody who goes back to being James Pierre? Don't know. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how good he can be. The one thing I will say is I don't see any reason at all for James Pierre not to be the starter anymore. I don't. I mean, he's better than Darius Slay. I think Darius Slay, to me, is a guy, it is really, really very, very clear to me, is a guy who's just not good enough anymore. And he's somebody who isn't going to help you anymore. He's not somebody who's going to help you win games. He's basically somebody that I would say is, if he's your fourth corner or something and you use him sparingly, he's probably still good enough that he can be okay if you give him some help and he's got the right assignments and the right position in your defense. But to me, I honestly think that James Pierre has now earned the right to go ahead and just be the starter. Him and Joey Porter Jr., right? Him and Joey Porter Jr. as your corners, Jalen Ramsey as your safety. And by the way, Jalen Ramsey playing safety has given the Steelers really an element they haven't had in a while, I don't think. They didn't even have it when they had Minkah Fitzpatrick. And that is a safety who is actually playing really physical and is out there laying the boom to people. Now, one of the most controversial plays, and might as well get into this whole thing, was, in the second half of the game, Jamar Chase and Jalen Ramsey got into it. Okay, and they were battling all day. They were talking trash all day. They were, whatever. After a play, it was actually third down and like 2 or something, and the Steelers got to stop, and the Bengals were trying to figure out what they're going to do. And after the play, Ramsey and Chase get into a scuffle. Chase apparently spit at Ramsey or something. Ramsey decides he's going to grab his face mask and then throw a punch. Look, the NFL handled it the way that it should have been handled. Jamar Chase, they did an investigation. Jamar Chase is suspended for next week's game. That's really should have happened. Suspend a guy. You can't spit on people. Okay? So he got suspended. What I object to is the way that Jalen Ramsey acted. I think that's a really selfish play. It really, what I would call stupid and selfish play. And I know there are a lot of people on social media that are angry at me because that's what I said. And guess what? I don't care. They needed him in the game. They needed him, and they didn't need to give up 15 yards and a first down at a critical point. In a critical game, you have to win. You got to be a better player than that. You got to be better than that. And all of the people that are giving me a hard time and saying, oh, well, he disrespected him because he spit on him, and what would you do, yada, yada, yada. You know what? As I say all the time, prisons are lined up with guys, right, who had to protect their manhood and all that other stuff and reacted in a way in a bar or something else and ended up, in some kind of a confrontation over something really silly. And they're sitting in prison for 2 years or 5 years or worse, thinking about, well, maybe I should have done something different. You got to be better than that. You've got to be smarter than that. You've got to have a cooler head than that. The Steelers need you in the game. They needed you in the game. They needed that, they didn't need to give up 15 yards there. And all of the people that are trying to justify what Jalen Ramsey did based on, he spit on him, that's not an excuse. Sorry. It's not. Absolutely not. You need to be smarter than that, especially when you're such an important player. And look, Jalen Ramsey was, a good player at corner. So far, he has been a superstar at safety. I mean, he has been a guy that has really changed the Steelers' defense at safety. He's been somebody that they can move him and use him in different places. And he's a safety, by the way, who's still a corner, so therefore they can use him to cover guys, better than some safeties can. He can step up. He's physical as hell. He likes to lower the boom. He wants to hit somebody. He gives them a little bit of an edge. So they need him in the game, period. So my thing is, I understand the sentiment that, guys spit on him and that's disrespectful and all that kind of stuff. I get it. But guess what? You need to be bigger than that. You need to walk away from it and let the NFL handle it when they can handle it. Make it very clear that, in your post-game comments that, hey, this dude spit on me. I hope the NFL does something about it. That's how you walk away from a confrontation like that. Chase gets what's coming to him, and you don't put your team in jeopardy. No, I get it. Well, it's just heat of the moment. That's great. But guess what? In the heat of the moment, that's when you have to be even better. Sorry. I understand why people are saying, it's just one of those things. But, it is what it is. And the thing about it is, if you listen to the referees after the game, because a pool reporter went in there, a pool reporter went in there and talked to the referee, and the referee said, "Well, I didn't see him get spit at. So all I saw was him punching a guy. So yeah, he should have been ejected. And guess what? If he wasn't involved in that confrontation to begin with, he wouldn't have got spit on. If he just walked away, the play was over. Everything was done. There was no reason for him to even be anywhere there. Walk away. Be a better and bigger human being. That's the point. Right? People giving me a hard time. Oh, well, it's, what do you let? Are you going to let somebody spit at you about all that other stuff? Look, first of all, let's not compare what would happen, on the street or in a bar to what happens on a football field. But secondly, more importantly, right, as I said to one guy who, claimed he was, a coach or whatever. So you would go into a classroom, and what you would tell young high school football players is, or high school teenagers is, you know what? If someone spits at you or disrespects you, you better retaliate. You better go and take care of it right then and there, and don't worry about the consequences. Is that what you tell them? Because again, to me, the jails are lined up with kids and people who had to protect their manhood over some silly confrontation because they weren't going to be disrespected. And guess what? I have a friend, from back in the day, same type thing. He was in a bar, right? So he was in a bar, a couple guys drinking, yada, yada, yada. One guy was like, mouthing off a little bit to a girl or something like that. And, next thing you know, it's a little bit of confrontation. My friend turns around, punches the guy in the face, knocks him in the nose. He falls back, hits his head, dies. My friend does 15 years in prison. Was it worth it? Because you protected your manhood? It's not. And it's the same thing. It is. I have no problem. I have no problem at all with a guy who is, out there giving his all, being, showing fight, showing a feistiness and all that other stuff. But you got to be smarter than that. You've got to be smarter than that, period. There are ways that you can handle it, right? The next play, he comes down the field and you knock him into next week. There's a lot of ways you can handle it, period. That doesn't involve losing your mind and punching him in the face and getting ejected. So, I think it's one of those things where, it's a heat of the moment. We've all had heat of the moment, but if you're in the heat of the moment, in a game like that, you got to understand the situation of the game and understand what the issue is. Period. Because if you don't, then you end up costing your team. Luckily, it didn't cost the Steelers. They won the game. But you could have. You put your team in a bad situation because you gave up 15 yards when it was 4th down. 15 yards and a first down. So to me, I think that's one of the things you have to realize and remember. It's so important to remember that. Like, there's a lot of ways you can do it and a lot of ways that you can try and do it. But to me, it is just so important to keep your cool. Now then, next thing from yesterday. I believe that Mason Rudolph is good enough that if the Steelers need him to play for a few weeks, they can win games. He showed that yesterday. I also believe this, that yesterday he might have actually been a little better than Aaron Rodgers. And maybe actually, I believe this, if Aaron Rodgers is hurt and has to sit out 2 weeks, which means his body heals and he rests for 2 weeks, it's not the worst thing in the world either. I'm not ready to go all the way to Mason Rudolph is better than Aaron Rodgers and should be the starter. I'm not ready for that. I'm not saying he's not, but I'm not ready to go all the way there. I really am not. I'm at a point where I just say, you know what? It's important for them to know. It's important for them to know the one thing you're going to get with Mason Rudolph that you didn't get with Aaron Rodgers is the ability to throw the ball down the field. And that's going to give you a chance. That's going to give you a chance to do a number of other things underneath. That's going to give you a chance to basically maybe even open up your running game a little bit. And so that's something the Steelers need to think about. Because with Aaron Rodgers, they haven't had that ability, or at least they haven't shown that ability to throw it down the field. It seems a lot more like, everything for Aaron Rodgers has been underneath, shorter passes, 10, 12, 15 yards at the most. They've had very few chunk plays. They've had very few attempts at really big chunk plays. And I'm talking about through the air. I'm not talking about, they throw the ball to Pat Freiermuth and he runs 60 yards with it. I'm talking about throwing the ball down the field. And you know what I'm talking about when it looks like that. I think, honestly, Mason Rudolph will probably give them the opportunity to throw the ball down the field and make teams respect that part of their game. So I don't know that it's the worst thing in the world if he plays a couple of weeks while Aaron Rodgers gets rested up or heals or whatever's going on with him. And, the Steelers have been very, very quiet about what's going on with him. It's just, a situation of where they're evaluating it. It sounds like it's his left wrist, not his right wrist. So if that's the case, then maybe he can play, won't miss much time at all. But you have to basically figure out, you have to figure it out with him. We don't know what it looks like yet. We won't know. And, maybe for another day until they do further testing. But my point is, Mason Rudolph has proven in so many ways that he is a guy they can rely on to be their backup. Here's what I like about it, too. Here's what I really like about it. He's a guy that could have quit. I mean, he's somebody who, honestly, they didn't really have a plan for a few years ago. They signed him real late in the process. They had already brought in Mitch Trubisky, and they had already brought in, they were bringing in Kenny Pickett, and he was a third-string guy sitting, holding a clipboard, running scout team, basically, inactive most weeks. And the Steelers were 7-7. They had benched Trubisky. They had Kenny Pickett. They weren't going anywhere. Pickett got banged up a little bit, and you know what? They gave Rudolph his chance, and then given that opportunity, he led them to 3 straight wins. They went 10-7 and everything else. So, the rest is history. He's rewritten his script. And then yesterday he came in and gave them a really good, solid performance. Now, I wrote this today in the Post-Gazette, and I mean this, really. He kind of has an opportunity, baby, to be the Steelers' next version of Charlie Batch, right? Where they give him the opportunity to really go out and, they give him the opportunity to really go out and basically, be their long-term solution at backup quarterback. Somebody that you can really look at and just say, hey, he is going to have an opportunity, I think. He's going to have a real opportunity to be here for a long, long time. He's almost like a coach because he really knows what's going on. He's very good about helping the other quarterbacks. He's very good at, helping some guys when it comes to, the offense and being a mentor. He's a great teammate, and he's somebody who's proven you could put him in there and you have a chance to win the game. Which is all you can ask for from your backup quarterback. You look at the situation in Cleveland and you have to laugh at the two. They got 2 backup quarterbacks who are starters. Their starter actually is in Cincinnati, but they've got 2 guys who are backups and they're trying to play. Neither one of them are any good. And so, I think sometimes when you think about backup quarterback, there are guys that think they should be better than they actually are. But, I think when you look at around the league, Mason Rudolph has sort of like produced or proven in so many ways that he's one of the best backups in the league right now. And I'm talking about backups. What do you want from a backup? A guy that, 5 games in, you have somebody hurt, right? You have somebody hurt and, your quarterback's hurt. You need someone to come in 5 games and win for you. He's your guy. He's your guy. He can do that. By the way, we are, as always, sponsored by FanDuel Casino. FanDuel is where you get on the app. You can basically download the app and you look at what they have for you. And basically what they have for you. Tonight, you're looking at the Cowboys and the Raiders. Cowboys are 3.5-point favorites. So you can bet it that way. The over-under is 49.5 on FanDuel right now. But there's a lot of other ways you can bet that. And that's the best part about the FanDuel app. There's so many different ways you can bet it. How about Ashton Giante rushing yards? The over-under is 67.5. Javonte Williams rushing yards, 76.5. How about Dak Prescott? Over 9.5 is his over-under for how many rushing yards he's going to have. There's a lot of different ways you can bet on this game, and you can do it in so many different ways. Go to the FanDuel app, download it, and try and see if you can't have a big Monday night. I know yesterday I had a pretty big day on my FanDuel app, betting on some of the NFL games, and it was a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, you got to do it. When you win, that's great, but you've got to make sure that you bet responsibly. So make sure that you go to your FanDuel app and get it taken care of. Speaking around the division in the AFC North, is there ever been a backup quarterback on a 2-8 team who's been talked about more than Shedeur Sanders over the last 24 hours? And it's silly. The conversation is silly. They played the Ravens yesterday. Steelers really needed the Browns or wanted the Browns to win. They didn't. The Ravens won. The Ravens play the Jets next week, so they're probably going to get another win. But the one thing about the Ravens is their offensive line doesn't look great right now. Their quarterback looks like he's a half a step slow right now, but they're better than the Browns. And that showed yesterday. They were able to go out, come from behind, and take advantage of the fact that the Browns quarterbacks are bad. In fact, it's one of those things. It's one of those things where I believe that the Shedeur Sanders discussion needs to go away. You're not doing anything at all. You're not doing anything at all to help him. You're not doing anything at all to help the Browns. And really, the discussion has become so ridiculously silly that in my mind, people are willing to lose credibility by talking about it. There's nobody out there that knows that Sanders for sure is going to be a bust. There's nobody out there that knows for sure he's going to be really good. What we do know is he played yesterday, wasn't very good. It was the first time he ever played. That should be the discussion. End of story. Not, well, his line didn't help him and no weapons and, he didn't have first-team reps and, the Ravens played harder against him than they did against – all these other things and not, I saw it in the first two passes. First 3 or 4 passes that he made, I just saw he's not good enough. He just can't play. I don't know if he can play or he can't. We'll see. Let him write his story. But this discussion for the last 24 hours has made my head hurt. Now, the Ravens are obviously the Steelers' concern. And I'll say this. I think the Ravens are going to have a hard time getting on a roll because I don't think their offense is right now. I think that Lamar Jackson is struggling. I think that he is beat up a little bit. I don't think he's 100%. I think that he's in a situation of where, he can't use his legs to escape. And when he can't do that, he's not nearly as effective. There are at least 2, if not 3 offensive linemen that the Ravens have who probably are not good enough. It's frustrating for Derrick Henry too, because, he's got this opportunity at times to make big plays, and it just is not happening for him for the most part because, the offensive line can't block for him. And so I think the Ravens offense is a lot less scary than probably, it sounds like it could be or should be. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about the Steelers against the Ravens. I don't think that the Ravens are just going to be able to go up and down the field against the Steelers. Now the Browns have a really good defense. That's part of it too. But the bottom line is, Lamar Jackson threw for less than 200 yards. He had 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. Rushing the ball. He ran it 4 times for 10 yards. He wasn't really that effective with his legs. I don't think he's right. And I think their line's beat up. And I think the combination of those 2 things may give the Steelers the opportunity to win, against them. And if all they got to do at this point is split with them, and they're probably going to win the division. The Ravens basically have to sweep the Steelers. And that's the thing about it is, if you look at the Steelers, they really, really are still in the catbird seat. And quite frankly, I don't think that it is going to be a situation of where I believe that the Ravens are just going to basically run away and hide here. What I saw yesterday against the Browns, I saw, a Ravens team that, in my mind at least, still has a lot to prove. Like a lot to prove. Period. Just as an aside at the end here, the quickest and easiest analysis ever comes from the Pitt Notre Dame game. Notre Dame had men in their front 7 and men on their offensive line. Pitt had men who were a little less. That game was won and lost in the trenches. there isn't really much else you need to say about it. They got beat by a team that was far superior up front. We'll do it again tomorrow. What we're going to try and do is see if I can line up a few guests for this week that will be really good guests in order to talk about the Steelers and the Bears. Until such time that we talk again, goodbye.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.